Good morning, literati, and welcome back to another episode of Buck's Books. As always, it is I, your host, Buck, and unfortunately, you will likely not be seeing much of Beefy because now I have a desk that's off the floor. But Buck, you may be asking, why? Why aren't you sitting on the floor like an animal anymore? Well, I'm glad you asked, and that ties into the same reason that you haven't heard from me in about a month. It's because I have successfully bought a new house. We did it, fellas. Hard fought and hard won. So you may notice that this room is kind of janky and beat up, and that's because I haven't painted it yet because it is easier to paint things in the winter, so I'm just going to wait. But I am going to gradually be decorating the office, so it probably won't look so much like this the next time we speak. I am relieved to have finally finished the arduous process of home ownership, and what's especially great is that there is a chunk of woods with a Sasquatch in it that abuts the back of my property. So when I do die young and unexpectedly, I can just kind of be rolled into the woods and returned to the earth, presumably eaten by the rabbits that are always in the yard. There's a ton of rabbits in the yard. So this is the good ending, I promise. And it leads us into the book that we're going to be talking about today, which is called Something in the Woods Loves You by Jarod Anderson. So in my case, I'm hoping the something in question is going to be the Sasquatch. If not, that's fine. In Jarod's case, it seems to be depression. The book is about depression, and that's fine in and of itself. I've got no problem with people writing about their mental illness. That's probably the best thing you can do with your mental illness. The issue I take is how painfully annoying he is, just as a person. And I know that's not very nice, especially that since this is his tell-all, he's bearing his heart, he's bleeding, per Hemingway, he's bleeding on the typewriter, just trying to get this out, and this is honest, and this is true, and this is his real experience, and that's fine. It's just, I recently learned a new word. It is unfortunately predominantly British, but I'm still going to use it because it's appropriate. It's twee, right? Twee, and it means quaint and saccharine and melodramatic and just over the top, cheesy, with the sentimentality. This book in Jarod in general is twee. So to dig into that a little bit deeper, he frames up each of the chapters. First of all, how I found our man Jarod in the first place is he's the crypto naturalist, right? So those are two things that I'm very excited about. That's naturalism in general and crypto as the Latin prefix for secret, like cryptid, not necessarily cryptocurrency. Although, you know what? It wouldn't be very crypto if I talked about it. So scratch that from the record. Nothing, feds. Don't worry about it. Anyways. So I figured crypto naturalism would be right up my alley, right? And I'd listened to his little blog. He's all over the Twitter, and he's just dropping bangers on the Twitter. And they're also somewhat twee. It's purple. His prose is purple, but sometimes it hits, as is the case with the poets. So I did follow him for a while, and sometimes I'm like, ugh, and then other times I'm like, nice, dude. So I wanted to see what he could do with an entire novel-length book, novel-length memoir. And it turns out not much. It's boring, is the thing. It's very boring, and I'm sure it wasn't boring to him, but it was boring to me, and it was boring to most of the other people who reviewed it on Goodreads. And I don't expect your depression memoir to be a thrill a minute. You know, that's sort of what characterizes depression. I think they articulated it very well on Big Mouth with the depression kitty, who's just like that fat purple cat who tells you to watch television that you've already seen and eat bonbons on the couch. And that's fine. But by its very nature, it's not going to be thrilling. I didn't expect it to be thrilling. I expected it to be honest and poetic and moving, you know, because once again, this is a dude who has a strong command of the English language, capable of turning a phrase, who is writing about the most profound emotional experience he's ever had. All the ingredients are there. What happened? What happened is... So, he talks about his own depression at great length and how he was saved from it by looking at birds. And that's good. You should look at birds. And he bought into the idea of success as happiness, and so he kept going through the motions and scrabbling higher up the academic ladder. And there's your first problem, buddy. You thought you were going to find closure, you thought you were going to find emotional certitude and balance in academia. Have you ever met a happy academic? Have you ever met a happy academic, or like a sane one? I know that we've talked about this before. I don't think teachers should be paid. I think it should work like artists and up and coming bands, and they should go to these jobs and they should only receive exposure and experience, and that's it. And donations. They can shake a little tin cup at the end like a tip jar. That's fine. I think that's the best thing we can do for tenured professors right now, because they're just absolutely useless. But our boy Jarod has decided this is what he wants to do with the rest of his life, because these are the trappings of success. Excuse me if I balance and make ridiculous sounds. I'm sitting on a yoga ball, and that will not be stopping anytime soon. So he went ahead and climbed the non-corporate but academic ladder in English and literature, which, that's where the money is. And zounds! He discovered that once he reached the, not top obviously, but like, because what is the top of the literary academic ladder? You're a book reviewer. You're a glorified book reviewer. So he didn't reach the top, but he was teaching and on track for tenure and doing all that. And I don't know if English teachers do research of any kind. I assume they just read a lot. I'm sorry, English professors do research of any kind, like the other sciences, like sciences. I assume they just kind of read Shakespeare over and over again and be like, but what do the curtains represent? Well, he was doing that, and somehow it failed to fulfill him. Go figure. So he became very depressed and started half-heartedly thinking about suicide, like passive ideation. He never had a plan of any kind, nothing like that. But that's a touchstone that he returns to many times in Something in the Woods Loves You. And in the course of this, he falls in love with a manic pixie dream girl. And they get married, and she becomes his caretaker because he's so depressed that he has to quit working at his job that he, devoted his entire life to and succeeded, but it just wasn't making him happy. And then he's at home, and he talks about how depressed he was being at home because he's just beating himself up all the time in his head, which, that's what depression is. But at the same time, you're making a lot of bad decisions back to back and using depression as an excuse. And when it really lost me, I think, was when he came into, when the girlfriend came home, as might have been the wife by this point. The girlfriend or wife, the significant other, this poor sap that he hooked, comes home, and she finds him lying face down on the carpet because he's so depressed. Imagine that. Visualize that. You are married to a grown man or woman. Right? And they have been depressed for a while, and now they're so depressed that they have to quit their job because the job is just making them so depressed. But they were depressed before they had the job, but now they're even more depressed, so they quit the job. They won't seek therapy. They won't do anything the therapist suggests. They won't take the medication. They won't take a walk. They won't do anything they're supposed to do. All they do is groan. Because that's depression, and they can't do anything about it because it's just the depression. And then you come home from work because you're the sole income earner at this point. You know, you come home from putting the roof over both of your heads, and you find him laying face down on the carpet. Not even on the couch, not even on a bed, on the carpet, in the middle of the floor. Just because he's so depressed. And like, I'm not here just dunking on people with depression. I understand that it's a real thing. We used to think it was a chemical imbalance. It's not a chemical imbalance. They've disproven that in recent years. It turns out it's just a function of faulty thinking styles that can be corrected if you do any of those things that we just said that he was adamantly opposed to doing. So he's going out of his way to not fix anything, right? And now he's just making a spectacle of himself. It's like setting a trap for her. He's waiting. Of course, he would never cop to that. You know, I just couldn't help it. The depression was too big. But like, you knew what you were doing, dude. You could have shuffled off to the bedroom. You know, if you really needed to just lay face down and cry into something. House is full of pillows that she paid for. Hey, Beefy. Beefy's here. Hey. No, that's the yoga ball. You can't be doing that. You will destroy us both. Anyways. Here, let's see Beefy. There, where? Look at the camera. Hey. Oh, there he is. What a little guy. Love this guy. Laying on the floor, right? Just kind of groaning until she comes home so she can pay attention to him. And then I checked out at that point. Because, like, there's just no justification for what he's doing beyond that. I understand you're sad, but, like, we've all been sad. And many of us have been sad for real reasons. You know, many of us have, like, lost everything. You know? Almost all of us have experienced grief of some kind. And, I mean, you put it in a brain scanner, grief is indistinguishable from depression. Really, the only difference is the lever gets stuck and depression takes longer and doesn't go away in its own time necessarily unless you actually mobilize and pull yourself out of the mud. So this is not to say that I'm speaking from a position of privilege, because we have all felt. However, there have been times when I was so racked with emotion that I came into the house and just crumbled to the floor weeping. Yeah, I think that's probably an experience that most human beings have had, assuming they got a couple of years under their belt. You know, assuming they've seen some of the horror of life. But I didn't wait for someone to find me. I got it out of my system, and then I did what I had to do. That is not what our man is necessarily suggesting. The book, I think that it would have done very well as a chapbook, because the first 3 pages of every chapter, or anything he says about actual nature, is at least decent. But again, it becomes twee, because he tries so hard to tie each of these observations he makes about the power of the oak tree and the resourcefulness of the hummingbird into how he is gradually recovering from depression. But, like, it doesn't really work. You know, it seems forced. And I didn't finish this book. Maybe it suddenly rebounds and becomes the best book I've ever read after he talks about what he was like, after he finishes talking about what he was like. But, like, he also talked a little bit about his therapeutic experiences, and he was a real dick to all of his therapists. And that sometimes happens with depression, but it's normally not depression that makes you a dick to your therapist. It's normally something else, something underlying. So I think I think the reason that this didn't really grab the way it was supposed to for me is because it's a book about how he was depressed, but I don't think his real problem was that he was depressed. But none of my business. It's his gimmick, and he's made a life out of it. You know, he's the crypto naturalist is doing very well for himself, especially as evidenced by this book that came across my desk. If you are the type who romanticizes your suffering, your own suffering, if you love your own suffering, or mental illness in general, or think that more people should devote their time and energy to making sure you feel good, I think this would be a great book for you. If you are normal or calibrated in the other direction, I think it would be a colossal waste of your time. And I made it a little more than halfway through the book, and normally I don't give it that long. Normally I will hit the point of a quarter, 25%, and if a book doesn't have me like on the hook by 25%, I decide life is too short. Life is way too short to finish this book, unless you are one of those previously established demographics, in which case have fun, or, well, it's not going to be fun because you don't have fun, but have whatever your analog for fun is in reading this book and wallowing in your despair. All right, that's enough out of me. Thanks for tuning in. I will be back probably within the week now because the house is bought and I've got nothing else in my way. Oh, but I am trying to learn how to relax. So if this starts to become work, if this starts to feel like work, I'm just going to not do it. And I owe you nothing. Just for the record, I don't owe you perfection. But I'm still having fun with it. So, see you soon. Like, follow, subscribe, etc. Toodles.